friends, it's Miss Seashell.
And Mr. E.
We're doing a video recording of Fooventures today due to technical difficulties. Sad face. Thanks for those of you that did join in earlier and asked your questions. We will address those questions. But we are here at Ledbetter Pond to the amazing cacophony of bullfrogs.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like we're piping that sound in, but that's like 5 or 6 different individuals all calling back at each other saying, "This is my territory, stay out of it."
Yeah, you know, some biologists and herpetologists would not be so happy to hear those bullfrogs.
Yeah, so they're maybe not supposed to be here so much.
There's a little bit of an invasion of the bullfrog that goes on in a pond. So our pond here at Oatland Island Wildlife Center is a borrowed pond. So what that means is that the soil was dug out of it and it's now a pond. So it was not made naturally.
Yeah, it fills in with water, with rainwater specifically, and so maybe there was a little bit of a marshy area here. It's a little depression around the pond, lower elevation, but it's definitely not a natural pond because it does have a water source, and that water source is just rainfall. So this pond is only filled with rain, and the rain settles, and then with all the heat we have, evaporation raises and lowers the depth of the pond.
Yeah, and I want you to think about ponds too, like a natural versus a man-made pond. Yeah. The edges are going to be different because of like a bucket building it or just being a gradual depression. And that's going to change the plant community on the edges. So you're going to get more, if you have a natural pond, you're going to have more grassy edges, more subtle slope, and that will also be improvement for a lot of wildlife. So man-made ponds are awesome. You do get lots of wildlife, but maybe not as much as you would get from a natural pond. So we want you to think about this. Put your thinking caps on. How do ponds form?
Yeah.
So take a second and think about that, because there's at least 3 animals that I can think of right off hat. There's probably more that create ponds in their just lifestyle.
Yeah.
So earlier we were talking with some friends on Facebook Live before it glitched, and Maisie came up with, she said beavers.
Yeah.
Beavers make ponds.
Beavers?
Yep. And Summer, she said alligators make ponds.
Oh yeah. So we've actually talked about alligators, how alligators make ponds, but maybe for the people that don't know how beavers make ponds, how would a beaver make a pond, Michelle?
Beavers are really into engineering. They're really into dams. They're like a civil engineer.
Yeah, they're very much so.
Yeah. And so they will take sticks and they'll take a creek, a trickling creek, and they'll block it. And they'll dam it, and they'll make a nice big body of water, and there you have a pond. So they have to start with a stream first. They don't usually start from nothing.
Yeah, and beaver ponds allow a nice, gentle, sloping flow for them to go out and gather food for themselves, and then also a place to raise their young. So really cool way that they kind of change their habitat. And then alligators, we've talked about how they dig with their tail and their body, and that alligator wiggle that we talked about, using their head and making some mud and then splashing it all out. And those wallows are really important for our swamps when they have droughts. And then the other one, which Michelle and I think is probably one of the most interesting because it's a habitat you wouldn't think would ever have a pond, is a prairie pothole. And a prairie pothole, or a vernal pool in a prairie, is formed by an animal that we spoke about just a little bit maybe 2-3 weeks ago.
Yep.
And they're the largest mammal in North America. Land mammal, I guess.
Yep. They used to roam by the millions.
Yeah.
So you guys know what it is? You got it. Bison!
Bison, yeah, American bison. Bison.
Prairie potholes. They make prairie potholes. So other things can make ponds, such as meandering creek. Sometimes a creek takes a sharp curve and it makes what's called an oxbow, and it drops off water and leaves a little depression, and then it straightens itself out and leaves that water behind, and now there's a pond there. And sometimes it's a glacier has gone through an area, like up north, and you get these big ice chunks carving out the land, making depressions. The ice melts, then you have a pond. And let's see, are there any other major causes of ponds? Sometimes the land just sinks, makes a depression. We get, some plate shifting, makes a pond.
Yeah, so like natural glaciation happens, but then also things like seismic activity, like forming cracks that then fill with water as well.
Yeah. So ponds are super important for wildlife, and so we're going to share with you some wildlife that absolutely have to have a pond, and then there's all kinds of wildlife all around us we can hear and see that use the pond as a resource for their needs.
Yeah. And one of those animals is a slider. So this is a yellow-bellied slider. I'll try to get it as close as possible so you guys can get a good view. Just let me know. And what he's doing right now, or she, it might be a male or a female, is putting that head inside, a little bit scared. Big scary animals all around it, where we can kind of think of us as predators. That's why you grab a turtle, its head sucks inside. It's a natural defense for them. It's also really, really important to remember that this is a predator. So he has a mouth that's a beak-like, and it will grab up fish and crustaceans and insects. And we're going to talk about where those fish and crustaceans live in the pond and kind of what levels they live at. This animal is going to go through all the different levels of the pond, be surface feeding, then also be surface, moving from the surface down to all the way to the benthos, which is the bottom of the pond. He is also going to be like actively hunting in the water column as well. So predators move throughout the pond, and this is an example of that, our yellow-bellied slider. So we're going to put him back in the water and get him back to where he belongs, since this is a wild turtle. We'll show you the bottom pattern really quick and then flip him back over. This actually looks like a female, and we can tell that because it has very short nails, and those nails will actually be long and skinny if it's a male, and the males will clink them together during breeding season to show off how they're a very fit individual, meaning they have lots of energy to grow fingernails. So long fingernails in boy turtles is actually a really good sign, whereas in boys, in humans, it's maybe not so great of a sign.
All right, so I'm going to show you another animal that is wholly lively dependent on this ecosystem, habitat behind us. And this is a froglet, and it's a bullfroglet. See his back legs come in first in the metamorphosis they go through. They go from the tadpole to the adult stage, but their legs in the back are the first things that come in. And I'm going to let him, he likes me. I don't know why he's not. Why aren't you leaving? There he goes. And then there's a whole bunch of others in here. They're all big, giant tadpole, bullfrog tadpoles. Except for this little guy, he's not a tadpole. I mean a bullfrog. He's probably, possibly a leopard frog.
Yeah, it looks like a leopard frog.
See him right there?
The things
Try not to hurt them.
about salamanders is they're so slippery. And salamanders are related to our frogs because they're all amphibians with that slippery skin.
Yeah.
So when we think about our frogs, you think about those four legs, but that aquatic lifestyle when they're in their metamorphosis, growing up from little to big.
Yeah, I got the little tiny little guy here.
Michelle, will you want to show off that duckweed too on your hands?
Yes.
Oh, we've got this.
Okay, so if when you
skin.
come to Oatland to visit, or if you have been to Oatland before, or actually any pond you go to, you're going to find this green mat looking thing all over the pond. That is actually a very tiny, tiny flowering plant known as duckweed. And there's also another species. There's like 2 or 3 different species in here. It's not just one species. There's also, what is it called? Wolf.
Yeah, I just blanked on it too. You're right with wolf though.
Dots. Wolf something.
Yeah.
Wolf, not wolfweed. But yeah, so this is duckweed all over our ponds. It's a little bit more than we would feel comfortable having, just because what happens is this is photosynthesizing. It's making biomass, and then if it dies out, the decomposition on it is going to suck all the oxygen out of the water.
Yeah, and that's not good for anything in the water that needs that oxygen to survive. Like all of our tadpoles that we were just exploring, like all of our species of fish that are in there, and then even the insects. So a lot of the things that we are going to show you today have gills. And so gills are really an interesting adaptation that aquatic animals have to pull oxygen out of the water. And the colder the water, actually the more oxygen that the water can hold. And so cold, fairly clear water means that typically you're going to have a high oxygen content. If you got a lot of tannins in your water, it's going to heat up quicker and going to lose oxygen quicker. So actually the mat of duckweed does provide some cover, a little anhinga flying through. It's pretty cool. And that actually does provide a little bit of shade, maybe keeps a little bit of oxygen, but as Michelle said, if we get a big die off of that, it can cause big problems. It can cause really, really bad eutrophication.
Anoxic conditions. Anoxic means oxygen.
No oxygen. Yeah.
So, yeah, it is definitely can be a problem. And the way we deal with it is we do treat it sometimes. I'm not exactly sure what we treat it with. And we keep the pumps running, aerating the water and moving it around, and that helps out too. We turn the pumps off so we could talk to you in the video, but
they're a little loud.
When you come, you'll know what we're talking about. They're like fountains in the middle of the pond that you'll see. So,
and that leaves open areas and also provides circulation, which is a good thing for the pond.
Yeah, and I think in the very beginning, they used to go in with a little boat and tow nets and try to scoop it out like that. So.
Yeah, you can manually remove duckweed. The thing is, it's going to reproduce even if there's one little tiny one left.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think this is a thing that is introduced, but a lot of times it's not introduced by humans, by boats moving from place to place, or by you know, getting on your shoe and then you step in a different body of water. It's comes on the feet of ducks. That's why it's called duckweed.
Oh, and guess what, Eric?
What?
You can eat it.
Oh yeah, and it's biomass. It's good for you.
I wouldn't eat it like pick it up and eat it.
Yeah. Don't do that.
But in some countries they do prepare it, and they say it tastes like watercress.
Yeah. And so it's a food item, and lots of animals eat it. Ducks and geese eat it. Lots of waterfowl eat it, and then, you know, it's also provides habitat and shelter. So even though it might look a little unsightly, it might look like a big green cement out there that you could walk on, it's definitely water underneath, and it's so much life underneath. And Michelle's got some examples of that life for you right in front of her, and so she's going to probably get a little closer so you can get a peek.
So this was a find I made this morning. This is a giant water bug. See him right here swimming around. Isn't that amazing how he looks like a leaf? Just so unbelievable. And he's a predator, and there's a fish. And probably he's stressed right now, but that would be good bait, good food for him. If he were hungry. That's a little tiny, probably a gambusia or a mosquito fish. Lots of little tiny fish in our pond right now. We had a major die-off. They say there was a thermocline. Mr. E was talking about how much cold water can hold so much more oxygen than warm water. And so what happens is the water levels will be mixed, where you'll have the warm water on top and the cold water on the bottom, or they'll flip, and then they'll have the warm water on the bottom, and there's no oxygen there, so you have a lot of animals die off because they're suffocating pretty much. So we did have a major fish kill, and it was just a normal thing that happens cyclically in nature. A lot of ponds were experiencing it at that time because of our hot summer that we were having and our drought. But the little fish are coming back, and so we have little fish in our pond right now. But one day, when you visit our pond, there may be big fish in there again. So we have a giant water bug and a little tiny, maybe a mosquito fish, possibly. We caught with our nets earlier. Mystery's going to bring over some other benthos. Benthos is a microhabitat. That means the bottom. So there are lots of habitats out here. You have the surface, the edges, the middle where they swim around, and you have the bottom habitats. And this is an animal that Mr. E caught earlier, and he caught it with his finger. It grabbed him. So we are still looking this organism up because we thought it was a hellgrammite, but he has very interesting gills at the bottom of his tail, if you can see those right there. Very big mouth parts, and Mr. E got snagged by him. So you can see he is an insect. You can tell because he has 6 legs. And that is the magic number for an insect, 6 legs. So this is a bottom-dwelling benthos predator hunting for small insects.
Yeah, and actually, when we weren't watching, he crawled out of his container and actually was predating this dragonfly larva.
Oh, no.
Super, super sad, but that's the circle of life, right? So this dragonfly larva was grasped by his pinchers and he was consuming it. So pretty amazing. As soon as I touched the dragonfly larva, he let go. But this is a dragonfly larva, super cool insect larva called a naiad. And the naiad is actually the stage of life that lasts the longest in the dragonfly family. A dragonfly may be underwater in its larval stage for 2 to 3 years before it comes out as an adult. And that adult might only live for a week to a couple months, maybe 2 to 3 weeks is kind of the average. What's really interesting about dragonflies, though, is that in both stages of their life, so as a larva and then as an adult as well, they're going to eat mosquitoes.
Yay, dragonflies!
So
woo woo!
They are, you know, we just pat them on
we
the back.
We love them.
We give them cheers.
Their whole life cycle.
We shout hooray. When you have a freshwater source that has a defined vegetation layer that is really, really like nice in regards to its water temperature, it's well established, it doesn't dry out, you can get larvae in there, and then the adults will hatch out and lay their eggs back in that same spot. And if you continue that cycle, then we reduce the amount of mosquitoes we have because they eat both the adults and the larvae. If we have open areas that aren't continually maintained, or if they're little puddles, or they're inside of a tire, or they're a hole in your backyard, or a 5-gallon bucket, or an uncleaned bird bath, all those things can grow mosquitoes, but they can't grow dragonflies.
Sad face.
And so then we have an imbalance, and we have a lot more of our mosquitoes because there's not enough dragonflies to eat them all. So, so natural balance is important in our environment.
Yeah. So both of these insects, their larval stages, just so you know, are going to metamorph into a flying, air-dwelling insect.
Yeah, 6 legs, wings.
This is possibly a Dobson fly.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a species of Helgermite. I just wasn't able to specifically identify the species. It's not an eastern Dobson fly, which is the common one that we find around here that has the many looking legs on the sides, but those projections aren't actually legs, they're actually gills. And you can see the gills in the tail of this individual, but the legs are up at the front, and they have 3 pairs of legs, 6 legs, because they are an insect. Eventually they'll hatch out and fly around.
Except for the giant waterbug I showed you. They're aquatic, right?
They're fully aquatic, yes.
They're not going to metamorph into a flying aerial
they live their whole entire life in the water. They go through a bit of metamorphosis. That's actually a fairly small one. They'll get actually much larger, 2 to 3 inches long sometimes. Yeah. Super crazy. Call them toe biters sometimes. I think that's a fun nickname.
Yeah. Cool. Not many people swim in ponds like they did well, I'm from Vermont, and people swim in ponds all the time up there. Oh, the things you don't know are going on in there. All right, so we're here at Ledbetter Pond, and if you want to come closer, I've been watching the surface. You can watch the dragonflies dancing, chasing each other. You might have to zoom in and look at nothing for a second, and you will start to see that the surface is alive with all kinds of dragonflies hunting and flirting with each other, trying to catch each other. Yeah, we have ducks in our pond right now too. We just had a pair of black-bellied whistling ducks fly in and land, and they're a little bit too far for you to see, but when you come to Ledbetter Pond, look for a tall-legged duck with red beak and red feet or red legs. Can't remember at the moment.
Red legs.
Red legs.
Pinkish red, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of the diagnostic, the way you see it and notice what it is by its beak and legs. Yeah, so dragonflies are all over the surface of our pond here. We got cicadas singing.
Cicadas singing. We heard really loud-mouthed hummingbird earlier that was screaming at us. Seen the anhingas fly in, and then there was a lot of action with the fresh water being here everything comes to get a drink as well. We've also seen alligators here, which is super cool. Wild alligators can smell the fresh water, and they find this place, and we let them hang out here. And we know that as people that live in the South, we can live with gators, and we can be peaceful with them, and we can respect them and give them space. And so if we follow those rules, they're usually fine. There's a vulture that just flew in. That's pretty cool. Black vulture
just came in. So really, I want to talk about plants, vegetation on a pond real quickly. So mostly we have these little islands right here, and at one point in time there was a rookery there. That means a breeding ground for, there goes a vulture, that's a turkey vulture. So we had a black vulture here and a turkey vulture here. I wonder if he's following that turkey vulture around. The island that you see in the middle of our pond used to have a bunch of nests of wood storks until about, what week was that? April, first week of April, second week of April, we had a big windstorm, and oh, so sad. Knocked the eggs out of the tree, and the birds kind of just gave up and have not come back since. Yeah, but maybe one day you'll come here and there will be a just beautiful display of birds nesting on that once rookery. But in this vegetative island, we have red maples, we have sweet gums. All on the edges, we have plants like this button bush. I love this plant. This is a native pollinator plant. If you're wondering what kind of pollinator plant if you have a little wet area around your house to put in, this is it. This is what you want to put in. Button bush has these really beautiful, I think of like truffula tree flowers, or somebody say coronavirus looking flowers. It's not a good way to look at it. And the leaves are opposite of each other. This is a fantastic native pollinator plant. The insects love to come and get the pollen out of these. Yep. And so you're supporting native pollinators by planting this, and you're putting a native plant that's naturally here in the ground, and that's what we want to do. We don't want to introduce invasives. Yep. All in the pond, all on the edges is a very invasive plant called alligator weed, and that plant is taking over. And unfortunately, it's going to like kind of suffocate and choke out. So anywhere you see along edges and you see this plant floating in the water, that is an invasive plant. Mr. E, we got some work to do.
Yeah, and so the plan with the alligator weed is to use rakes and kind of like giant treble hooks to grab onto these mats of floating vegetation and pull them up on land. Once they're up on land, they're removed from the water source. As long as it's not a really swampy area, they'll actually get killed off by just the heat of the sun. They're very vascular, they need a lot of water. So if we can get them up on the banks, they can die off, and then we can remove kind of these mats, and those mats can actually allow access to our middle of our pond in that island area for predators and things like that. So the more we remove it away, the more likely it is that our rookery will kind of bounce back. Like Michelle said, with those storms, with the high winds that we've had, our rookery was damaged, and then through past storms and hurricanes, we also lost some of the large trees that they would nest in on that island as well. So as the smaller trees grow back up, hopefully we'll have a return of that rookery. Because up until this year, we'd have successive growing years of our rookery, more and more and more nests. So we hope to have that continue for 2021.
Yeah. But our pond is just a wonderful place if you are a bird watcher. Bring your binoculars, because it's not just necessarily like wading birds that you're going to see. I've been hearing woodpeckers the entire time. We just heard hummingbirds, nuthatches, flycatchers.
There were kingbirds here yesterday. That was awesome.
Ducks. We think of water birds, but
yeah, all of our heron species can be seen here. Lots of really cool interactions between kind of our great egrets and our snowy egrets that come and feed here. So really cool area to see a lot of wildlife interaction because of the food sources that are here, basically.
Yeah. And also, like, the diversity of habitats that we have in one little area is also going to promote wildlife too, because we're on edges, right? We're on edges of all these different habitats.
Fringe.
We're on the edge of a marsh, and that's got to have certain birds and certain animals there, but they might need a little fresh water every once in a while, so they'll fly over here. And so Summer asked us earlier, was this fresh water, was this a brackish water sometimes? Oh, yes. And so we just want to let you know that this water is fresh water. It is high, it's a depression, but the bank's edges are high enough that there's really never been a spillover. Because if there was a spillover, you would see vegetative die-off, because plants have to be really well adapted to living in salt water. And Spartina alterniflora is really good at it. But other ones are not so good at it. This is fresh water, and so we're here on a freshwater source, a saltwater source, and then forests all around us.
So many habitats very close by, so lots of animals utilizing this area, moving in and out of that fringe habitat, that edge habitat that's really, really important. We also have a really amazing view of the sky here. So at Oatland, you know, at least 2 years ago, we had such huge canopy you couldn't see the sky. Now it's a little bit depleted from some of our storms. But typically, when you can't see the open sky, you can't see all those amazing soaring birds. So right now we can look up and see our Mississippi kites and our swallowtail kites. We can see bald eagles, red-tailed hawks, all sorts of vultures up there. So
osprey.
Another great place where there's open sky where you can view animals coming in, circling the forest, finding perching spots. Very, very cool.
Guess what? Let's tell them about what's coming soon to
our
platform.
So super exciting, coming soon. We're going to have a viewer, basically a built-in set of binoculars.
Is it going to be free or a cost?
It's going to be completely free. You guys are going to be able to utilize it to look at a distance and see things close up. So very, very exciting. We'd like to thank Friends of Oatland Island, who is helping out with the funding for that. They're super, super supportive of us. And then also our DNR, Georgia DNR, is part of a grant system that we've gotten for viewing wildlife. Is going to be using some of that for our signage and our interpretation. So new signage, new viewer, super exciting that that's all happening. So yeah, we're super excited for people to visit. I know. It's like, come on, we got all this new stuff we want you to utilize.
You know, this pond is really a treasure at Oatland Island, because you're walking along and you're seeing all these exhibits, and you're expecting to see animals that are confined and contained, and then all of a sudden, bam, here is a wild, open, free opportunity to see special finds, because we don't know what's going to be here, right? We've seen the roseate spoonbills here before.
Roseate spoonbills down here. A lot of times if I have a little bit of an extra minute, come sit here, take a few calming breaths, and just let the pond come back to life. It's a little bit of a noisy walk up on the platform coming up here. You're a little clunky, but if you sit down, let things quiet down, everything starts coming back, and you'll see lots of animals. Something's really interesting is, like, especially in the spring of the year, you'll see raccoon mamas coming down and getting food for their babies, going around the edges of the pond. With the viewer, you can kind of scan the edges to see all the different wildlife. A lot of times the alligators are up there.
Possums. I've seen opossums, or evidence of opossums coming here. So we do have wildlife coming in that are using the pond as a freshwater source.
That was a green heron making that crazy sound.
Using it as a freshwater source, and also as a hunting ground, right? There's lots of opportunity. So raccoons actually are pretty devastating to a rookery. Right? So how do the birds in the rookery get around that?
Yeah, so we talked about the pond, right? And the pond has an island, and what a rookery needs, or what it usually is built around, is the idea that we have standing trees surrounded by water. So in some areas, like in the Okefenokee Swamp, we have amazing, massive rookeries because there's water all around them. And as you guys may know, the Okefenokee Swamp is also home to a lot of...
Sorry, I'm zoning out because there's an animal trying to escape your container. Alligators.
Alligators. And alligators are everywhere in the Okefenokee. And because they're everywhere, and because they're all over the place, what happens is those act as a natural deterrent to nest predation. Because what an animal would have to do was cross over the water to get to the tree, to climb up into the tree to get to the nest. And so because we don't have that happening, because that's not an active thing that a raccoon wants to do when there's water that is full of alligators, we get this really, really interesting kind of symbiotic relationship where the alligator benefits from maybe a baby bird that falls out of a tree, and the baby birds benefit from their nest being protected, so a raccoon doesn't come in and eat all of the eggs or the helpless babies. So really cool, interesting kind of protection, I guess, that they provide, which is not maybe purposeful, but also is a really good result because they know where to build their nest. They know where a safe spot is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Super cool. Super cool. I think the coolest fact about the nest, though, is that sometimes when the rooker gets a little bit crowded, they'll build on the back, and we actually have like land with tall pines there. When they build there, those nests are not nearly as successful as the ones that are surrounded by water because they have more nest predation. So really cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we're about wrapping up. We know that this is a little bit different than normal because it's not live, and so we'd like to have you guys comment please on this video after you're watching or while you're watching, and we will come back and we will ask any of your questions that you might have.
And also please tell us what you've seen special finds yourself in your days or times if you've visited us before. Give us your information. We love that.
Yeah. It's all about learning. So what you're curious about, we want to know. I want you to stay curious too.
Yeah, so we want to just thank again our Friends of Oatland group for being such champions and trying to make this happen and bring education to you.
Yeah,
because we miss you.
Thanks, guys.
Be safe.